Thank you, Samra. And again, such an outstanding job done by each of our students. We're extremely proud of you and look forward to this summer's mentorship program. Next, we're going to hear from Brad Fausch, Assistant Director of the Office of Research, Commercialization, and Development. He'll be covering a wide range of topics: how to partner with UNC Charlotte, the resources we have to offer, and the process of research collaboration, and also introducing some licensing opportunities with the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Brad, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Fosh. I am the Assistant Director for the Office of Research, Commercialization, and Development here at UNC Charlotte. I've been asked to say a few words a little bit about the technology transfer process at UNC Charlotte. What does it look like to kind of partner or work with the university, and how do we handle things about technology development, IP ownership, and all that sort of stuff. So my office really has two inflection points where we get involved in the IP discussion, the technology transfer process with companies or outside parties. I've kind of broken this out into two areas. The first one I'm calling kind of pre-funding. So this is before a project starts. When a company wants to work with the university, there's typically a lot of questions around a whole bunch of different things that I'm going to go into, but a big one is always kind of IP ownership and who's going to own any sort of technology or discovery that comes out of that process. Those details are usually worked out in something called a sponsored contract, which is an agreement between the university and the company or the party working with the university. The second part of my talk is going to be on kind of post-funding or post-discovery. So once the university actually has that piece of intellectual property or that patent or whatever that may be, and we want to kind of transfer that out of the university and into society, how does that process work? And so those are typically handled through something called a license agreement or an IP license agreement. And I've got a slide talking about that. So before I kind of jump into my main two slides, I would be remiss if I didn't give a quick pitch for, kind of the benefits of working, not just with UNC Charlotte, but working with universities in general. UNC Charlotte is a big place. We have a lot of what we call human talent on campus. We have over 30,000 students. In fact, we're now the second largest university student body-wise in North Carolina, certainly the largest university in the kind of Charlotte region. With that comes 1,000 faculty members, most of them with their doctorate degrees. So very, very smart people that we have on campus. They're spread out over about 171 undergraduate programs, 65 master's degrees programs, and we now have 24 PhD programs. So no matter what your kind of research area is, whether it be, say, water filtration technology or blood vessel imaging, we probably have an expert on campus that can kind of help or would at least be interested in looking at that sort of project. Besides the human talent, we have a lot of infrastructure. So I've been at the university for just about 13 years. Just about every year, we've had a new building go up and go live on campus. So we've got kind of new world-class research labs. These include clean rooms, wet labs. We even have a business kind of co-working space now on campus in our Portal building. And Mark Spindler, who's going to be in the kind of breakout chat room with me later, would be happy to speak with anyone that's kind of interested in these sort of working at the university, renting lab space, renting office space, all those sort of questions. So just kind of jumping in to the main topic of my slides, I had mentioned those really two kind of ways my office gets involved in this kind of technology transfer process. The first one is pre-project or pre-funding. So when a company wants to come to the university and work with us, what are some of the kind of issues that we need to talk through and figure out to structure this agreement? A big one is always IP ownership and who's going to own patents and inventions that come out of these collaborative projects. And these are kind of broken up into two different areas. We have patentable inventions, which are typically things like hardware, maybe some really advanced chemical or scientific processes, or even software in some cases. And for patent ownership, the university follows US patent law. We've got North Carolina statutes and policies that we have to follow, as well as university policies. And these all basically say that patent ownership stays with the inventors or flows with the inventors and then ultimately to their employer. So if it's UNC Charlotte personnel that are coming up with a new invention, typically ownership stays with UNC Charlotte for these patentable inventions. If the ideas are created on the company side of things, then the company would own them. And then oftentimes what we have is this kind of joint or co-ownership situation where you have both, say, a company and the university co-owning these patents. On the copyright side of things, that's a little bit easier. So copyrights might also be software. They might be reports, graphics, things that are kind of generated in the course of a research project. The university has a lot more flexibility with those copyrightable type materials, and typically we can just very easily transfer ownership of that to the company. The next kind of area that hits a lot of people, if you're not familiar with working with the university, is that research costs money. So yes, we are a state public university, and we do get a lot of funding from the state of North Carolina, but typically that doesn't cover things like, say, graduate students that are going to be working on these research projects, or material, equipment, and so forth that has to go into these research projects. So research costs money, and typically there's some sort of budget request that goes along with a research project that's being funded on campus. If you're kind of a small business, there are some grants that are available. For example, the SBIR and STTR grants are a great resource. And so oftentimes we partner with small businesses that have been awarded one of these SBIR type or STTR type grants, and then they can use part of that grant money to subcontract to the university and get the money or get the research paid for that way. And the last kind of thing I wanted to point out about working with the university is academic freedoms and publications. So we are a university. We are not a private company. Our primary mission is to teach and educate and graduate students and also publish. And so all of these things are very important for the university. And what that means is that although we can keep company confidential information secret, so we don't have to publish that, but if there is some sort of discovery or big breakthrough that happens during a research project, our professors and our students need to have the rights to be able to publish that. So that's just something to keep in mind when you work with the university versus, say, at a private company, is that universities need to be able to publish their findings. So kind of flipping over now to the post-project side. So this is where either a project has been completed or the university has some sort of technology, intellectual property that could be in the form of patents, kind of sitting on our shelves, and the university is not able and really doesn't have any interest in making or selling any sort of commercial product. So that's where we really have to look to our collaborators and our partners on the business side of things to kind of take these technologies forward and ultimately introduce them into the marketplace. The way that process usually works is through what's called a license agreement. So as I kind of mentioned on the last slide, typically, at least for patents, IP ownership for these patents stays at the university level. But because the university can't make or sell these products, we need to license the rights, the commercial rights to those patents out to, say, a company, for example, that can actually make and sell a product. These license agreements are very flexible, so we can carve them up, for example, by field of use. So you might have, say, a new antibody, and we might license the drug or therapeutic use to one company, and then the diagnostic or testing use to another company. We can carve them up by geographic region. So if someone's only interested in the United States market, we could license to that company. And if a European company just wants rights to the European market, we could license to Europe. And so by doing this licensing practice, we actually have a lot of flexibility on how we can get these technologies out the door. The thing that everyone always wants to talk about is kind of money. So how much does it cost to license these technologies from the university? And I will say this is actually the easiest part of the licensing process. I think people are very comfortable talking about money and licensing and costs. If anyone's ever bought a house or bought a car, those certain benchmarks we can look at. We can look at comparables, all sorts of things to make sure that everyone's getting a fair value. The nice thing at UNC Charlotte is we really don't have any sort of minimums or maximums. We have a lot of flexibility on how we can structure these terms. And ultimately, the university wants to see these technologies get out the door and get into the marketplace. And so we can kind of structure that in any way we want, while at the same time, we have to make sure that the university gets some sort of fair value for the technology, because oftentimes there's been a lot of investment that has gone into developing these technologies. So in a typical license agreement, there's usually something called an upfront fee. This is typically in the form of cash that has to be paid when you're signing these agreements. At UNC Charlotte, I've seen these anywhere from $500 to $50,000. And so again, a lot of it depends on the technology type, the type of tech company that's licensing it, and what their goals are, and all those sort of things get factored into the equation. There are kind of back-end fees, typically in the form of royalties and milestones. And so, for example, royalty would be some sort of percentage of future sales of the product. Again, those can range anywhere from less than 1% to over 10%. A lot of it depends on the type of technology that's being licensed. And then other things like patent cost reimbursements. These are things that people don't usually think about when they're licensing a technology, but there could be $10, $20, $30,000 of patent costs that the university has spent, and the university needs to make sure that those costs get recouped. Oftentimes, that is kind of the largest cash payment that our licensee companies are expected to pay. The last thing that isn't really the most interesting thing to talk about, but this is really where we probably spend most of our time negotiating these license agreements, is legal issues. And so unless you're an attorney, you probably wouldn't even really think about these things, but they're really important to make sure everyone's on the same page. For example, enforcement of the patents. Enforcing a patent could cost millions of dollars. And so generally, the university doesn't have that kind of budget to go out and spend millions of dollars enforcing patents. And that's something that we would look to our company or our business partners to take the lead on. Same thing with liability. If a company is going to take a technology, typically a very early stage technology, and bring it to the marketplace, the university doesn't want any sort of liability for that. If something should go wrong or someone should get hurt using that technology, the university asks that our companies, our licensees, have insurance, that the university is named as a co-insured on the insurance policy, just to make sure that the university has very limited liability in these sort of situations. So again, not really a fun thing to talk about, but these are things that come up time and time again every time that we are trying to negotiate these sort of license agreements. So at UNC Charlotte, we get about 40 or 50 or so new discoveries or technologies a year through my office. Some of those make it through the process where the university will actually invest in patenting them. Of those, I'd say at any given time, we probably have about 100 or so licensable technologies. So these are things where the university is actually, it's gone through a screening process. The university has invested in some IP or patents around them, and we feel like we've got the data and the knowledge to actually, license these sort of technologies. We've got a new portal at UNC Charlotte where you can take a look at a sample of these technologies. We've got about 50 of them up right now, and we're adding more every few weeks. And that's at our website, which is orcd.uncc.edu. When you get there, there should be a link on the left-hand side for available technologies. If you don't see anything that you're kind of interested in, just send us an email, invent@uncc.edu. And I bet that we probably have something kind of on our books that might be interesting to you, whatever it is that you're working on. And if not, we probably have that human talent or that professor on campus that's working in that area. We'd be happy to make an introduction for you. Mark Spindler, who's also going to be in the chat room with me later. He's kind of our industry partnership guru, and he would be happy to answer any questions that you have about kind of partnering with the university, renting space, renting office space, and all the things that go along with that. So, okay, so we are very fortunate to have two of our professors here with us today. We've got Dr. Susan Trammell from our Physics and Optical Science Department, who's going to be talking a little bit about some of the research in her lab and some of the technologies she's developing around blood vessel imaging. And we also have Dr. Jordan Poehler, who's from our chemistry department. He's going to be talking about some of his work in water filtration type technologies. So please stick around and listen to Jordan and Susan.
Hi, my name is Susan Trammell, and I'm a professor of physics and optical science at UNC Charlotte. And I'm going to introduce you to a new imaging modality for applications in medicine that my students and I have been developing in my lab. So enhanced thermal imaging is a thermal infrared imaging technique that uses heat as a contrast agent to detect vascular structures embedded in tissue. It's important to note that enhanced thermal imaging provides images at the video rate, so this is a real-time imaging technique. So a human body at normal temperature emits strongly in the thermal infrared. That is, it looks really bright. But the problem is different tissues in the body are all at about the same temperature. So in a thermal image, there's not very much contrast, and it's very difficult to tell one tissue type from another. And we can see this in this image that I've provided here that's of a cooler and a warmer object. And you can see the cooler object, it's about the same temperature as the background. It kind of fades into the background and you don't get good contrast. The warmer object, on the other hand, jumps right out. It's really easy to see. You have very good contrast. So we're going to try to achieve that kind of contrast in an image of blood vessels embedded in a tissue. So the way our imaging method works is that we actually selectively heat blood vessels embedded in tissue by illuminating the tissue and vessels with a green LED. The blood absorbs light much more strongly than the surrounding water-rich tissue, and this causes the blood to heat up slightly, about 0.5 degrees Celsius, relative to the surrounding tissue. And so this selective heating acts as a contrast agent and makes the vessels stand out in the thermal imaging, just like our warmer object in that picture. We can also apply filters as we acquire the images, and this will enhance the contrast in our images. And so there are several applications for this technique in medicine, and I just wanted to highlight two. One is surgeries that require vascular repair or manipulation. An example of that might be cardiac bypass surgery. And in this 3-panel plot, what you're seeing at the far left is an enhanced thermal image of coronary arteries in a porcine heart. And what you see, the yellow is the blood, the warm blood, which is about 0.5 degree warmer, flowing through the coronary arteries. And in the right two images, these are our enhanced thermal images with our filters applied. And you can clearly follow that coronary artery across the heart tissue. And then in the far right, you can actually see that we've delineated pretty clearly the edges of that blood vessel. Another potential application for this kind of imaging is to identify margins during tumor resection. So you can see this is an image on the left of a tumor in a murine model, and you can see the tumor mass in this region. And then on the right-hand side is our enhanced thermal image of this same region. And what I'm pointing to there is something called the peritumor region. This is a region that has a lot of blood vessels in it and is routinely used to identify the margin of a tumor mass. And we can see that this appears very clearly in our enhanced thermal image. So our system is very compact and portable. This is just a schematic of what the system looks like. It could be used at the bedside. It can be used in a clinical setting or in an OR. It does provide real-time imaging, so it could be used during a procedure. There's no ionizing radiation, and we don't require any use of any IV contrast agents, which some people are allergic to. Our system provides a spatial resolution comparable, or actually better than ultrasound, at a comparable price point. So that's a quick introduction to enhanced thermal imaging. Thanks for your attention.
Hey, my name is Jordan Poehler. I'm a professor of chemistry at UNC Charlotte. And I want to tell you about some of the technology that we've developed here with my students and colleagues, and that we have intellectual property for through UNC Charlotte. Throughout some of my slides, you'll see this little QR code. If you want to get to any of the publications or some of the IP that this material is based on, you can just scan that and get to all of that information right away. We're funded by several agencies, most notably the I-Corps and also the EPA for our materials. What we're after here are new materials for water purification, not water filtration. This isn't a third world solution. We're looking at water purification, trying to remove really difficult molecules from drinking water that are very difficult for the water treatment facilities to take care of. So there's a whole host of these emerging and known contaminants in our water. We're drinking them every single day, and some of them have significant health concerns for humans and also the environment. I want to focus a little bit on PFAS, Gen X, some of these materials that you've heard about in the news, very difficult to get rid of from drinking water. And we're also super awesome at getting rid of heavy metals from drinking water and other types of things like personal care products, antibiotics, pesticides, the stuff that you find in water that's coming to your tap into your house at very low levels. So we're talking about purifying water for chronic exposure, not acute exposure. Okay. Just some examples. If you're in the water space at all, then you know about these maximum contamination levels put out by the EPA for known and emerging contaminants, particularly this number here. This is a very small number, 70 parts per trillion for these PFASs. And so we want to try and make sure that people in their homes, in their small businesses, have the ability to drink clean water, right, at a reasonable price. So we have a lot of technologies. Some of these technologies are based on membranes, right? So we started off these projects with single-walled carbon nanotubes, and they work great, but they're very expensive. We've moved on to other types of materials, different types of graphenic materials and cellulosic materials that are much less expensive, and the types of materials that can be commercialized and manufactured at reasonable cost. We also have bed filtration material or grinding materials, starting with a zeolite and functionalizing it to turn it into an anion exchange resin. You see here the dirty water, the clean water. It works great, and we have lots of other data to show you if you take a look at some of our papers. But here are some of the take-home messages, okay? So these are results where we are measuring the percent removal of various contaminants like PFOA, PFOS, different types of organic compounds in water, and then all of these heavy metals, these things are not good for you at all, found in water. And what we did is we started with the maximum contaminant level, right, where they shouldn't be higher than, and we were able to remove them by 99% or 95% for each of those. So really nice results. The most important result, though, and I'm going to tell you where the real value of this technology is its regeneration and its reusability. Okay, so we not only do we have a green synthesis, a sustainable green synthesis, because we use only water and a few reagents and hardly any power through our novel sonochemical processes, but these materials can be regenerated and reused. And what you see here are these little bar graphs. We are basically getting the same result time after time until we just stopped at 37 because the student just ran out of time. She had to graduate, but this will go hundreds of cycles of use. So why is that important? Well, when we think about our value propositions for this particular technology, we think about lower cost of ownership, right? When you go to the store and you spend $45 for a filter that you're going to put into your refrigerator, 6 months later, you throw that thing away. What you're going to do with our technology is you're going to mail it back to us. We're going to regenerate it, and we're going to send it back to you just like a subscription service, right? So lower cost of ownership, lower cost of manufacturing. We don't have a lot of work. We don't have any organic reagents. If you want to manufacture in Europe and other places around the world, you have to think about reusability and low environmental impact. So these are the types of things that we think our technology can really help, and it can be scalable and it can be profitable. And I really thank you for your attention. Thank you.